Ultramarine is a deep, vibrant blue color. Some blues feel cool, some feel smooth, some hint at purple, others verge on green. But ultramarine is like nothing else. No color can compare. The pigment was originally made by grinding lapis lazuli into a powder. It was considered more precious than gold. Some say thieves would scrape it right off the canvas. Others claim that people who owned ultramarine paintings brandished them as proudly as they did their precious gemstones. Lapis lazuli has been mined for centuries from a location still in use today, an arid strip of mountains in Afghanistan. First mined over 6,000 years ago, the rock was transported to Egypt, and the powder is said to have been used by Cleopatra as eyeshadow. She is still depicted to this day in movies and other media with an intense sweep of blue over her eyes. She believed it had magical properties and had entire walls of her palace inlaid with lapis lazuli. It was also used to decorate the tombs of King Tut and other famous pharaohs. The name comes from the Latin word ultramarinus, meaning beyond the sea, indicating not the rock's color, but its origin. The pigment was imported into Europe from the mines in Afghanistan by Italian traders during the 14th and 15th centuries. Ultramarine became highly popular the moment it was introduced into Europe. During the Renaissance, due to lapis lazuli's expense, rarity, and the time-intensive process it took to grind the mineral into paint, it was used sparingly, usually reserved for the robes of the Virgin Mary and other holy figures. The yield was small, with 1 gram of mineral producing around only 30 grams of pigment. As a result, the color came to symbolize humility and purity, as well as signify the wealth of the patron who commissioned its use. European painters depended on wealthy patrons to underwrite their purchase. An artist would often charge for the pigment separately on the invoice so that the patron could then choose how much ultramarine they wanted to pay for. There is a painting that hangs in the National Gallery in London today. It is a dark, dramatic snapshot of Jesus being carried to his tomb. It dates back to 1501, but for a long time art historians did not know who had painted it or why some parts, including a blank bottom corner, had been left unfinished. The answer came in 1864, though it was rejected and contested for many years. The artist was Michelangelo, and the blank corner most likely designated for the robes of the Virgin Mary. Art historians believe the painting was left unfinished because the ultramarine pigment designated for Mary's robes had not arrived from the patron, and at the age of 25, Michelangelo could not have paid for the pigment himself. Legend has it that while waiting for his ultramarine in Rome, Michelangelo left to find the human-sized block of marble that would ultimately become the white stone flesh of his David. He returned the money paid to him by the church and left Rome with the painting unfinished. Even Da Vinci's The Last Supper reveals the reverence he had for ultramarine. Jesus is cloaked in ultramarine, but Judas is painted in azurite. Azurite was cheaper, duller, far less pure, a false blue for a false disciple. In the 17th century, Dutch artist Last Vermeer used the pigment extensively in almost all of his paintings. The turban of the girl with a pearl earring is painted with ultramarine and lead white, and finished with a glaze of pure ultramarine. Ultramarine runs through almost all of his 34 confirmed paintings, showing up not just in blue objects, but in dark shadows and in white walls, in human flesh, in fabric of all hues, in green leaves, in black tiles, in the purple of lights and tablecloths, and in the murky brown of wooden beams. Vermeer was so taken by ultramarine that he wouldn't settle for lesser blue pigments. Refusing to paint without it, he drove his family's fortune into the ground. At 43, Vermeer died broke and unfulfilled, leaving his wife and 11 children deep in debt.
How could you?
But Vermeer's obsession with ultramarine might have paid off. In the early 20th century, a frustrated Dutch painter, slighted by critics, turned his vengeful hand to forgery. His name was Han van Meegeren, and he painted a number of fake Vermeer paintings. One of them was sold to Nazi military leader Hermann Göring and became one of Göring's prized possessions. When the Allies discovered the painting in a salt mine alongside the rest of Göring's looted art collection at the end of the war, the possibility of a new Vermeer discovery thrilled them.
It's a Vermeer.
But when the painting was traced back to Van Meegeren, the blue pigment on the canvas was tested to see if it would match the chemical structure of lapis lazuli. It was soon discovered that the pigment was part ultramarine, part cobalt, and cobalt pigment wasn't discovered until 1802, more than a century after Vermeer's death. Fully aware of Vermeer's obsession, Van Meegeren had specifically purchased ultramarine, but the seller had secretly diluted it with cobalt to cut costs. The trickster was brought down by a trickster. Van Meegeren was sent to prison, but he died before he made it there. In 1826, a version of ultramarine was developed by a French chemist. In order to differentiate it from its mineral counterpart, it was called French ultramarine. French ultramarine was so vivid in color that it became more popular than the original ultramarine. With the original ultramarine running out of supply and its costliness, synthetic ultramarine became very popular. In some ways, it was said that this was the beginning of the end for blue. Almost overnight, ultramarine blue was instantly available to painters of any means. But there was something about the elusive, impossible nature of the world's truest blue that was lost once it went mainstream. Synthetic ultramarine, due to its lack of mineral inclusions, boasts a richer tone than its semi-precious predecessor. Traditionalists would still insist on grinding the original at great personal expense, even with the artificial paint readily available. American novelist and poet Alexander Thoreau wrote, "A color may be too pure. Modern shades and colors often appear hideous, ironically because of their extreme purity." Blue is everywhere now. Today, buying a sweater in blue is an unremarkable act. There is a blue pencil in every set. It is the most popular and the most trusted color in the world.